Today we're going over 20 of my favorite 4K movies that are available on 4K UHD. Now, these aren't necessarily my all-time favorites. If there were some other movies that are available on 4K, these would get bumped a little bit lower on the list. I still love them nonetheless, but these are the ones that I picked off my shelf. There's 20 of them, and they're all available on 4K UHD. If you're new to collecting or you're just getting back into it and you're looking for some of the best 4K movies, here's 20 of them. Now, not everyone's going to have the same favorite movies. Not everyone has the same taste. My list might not match yours, so I have a little bit of something for everybody. I have action, sci-fi. I even have an animated selection in here. So stay to the end. Check out the list and let me know if my list matches yours. The first one we have is Karate Kid. Now, I grabbed all three because if I watch the first one, I have to watch all three of them, and that's just me. It might not be for everybody. But this one here, man, I love the picture, the sound. The 4K here was totally worth getting this one. And you have Pat Morita, Ralph Macchio. You really can't go wrong. Just an iconic 80s classic right here. Now, I am in the camp that Johnny is the hero. There's a whole fan theory on the internet that tells you why. I love this movie. Number 2 is True Romance. Now, this is something that I absolutely love it. I found this one by myself. Nobody introduced this to me. Nobody talked about it. It was just something that I rented on a whim. And man, this is such a great film. You have Christian Slater, Christopher Walken. It was written by Tarantino. It was directed by Tony Scott. There's so many good things that are going with this. Brad Pitt is in this movie. Val Kilmer, Gary Oldman. The list goes on. This is a guy's movie. Just really enjoyed it. And oh man, one of my favorites. Number 3, we have Batman. This is Batman 89 starring Michael Keaton. Jack Palance is also in this movie. It was one of the first movies that I got to go see in the theater. It was something special, and this is just honestly probably one of my favorite Batman movies ever. Anytime I do watch this one, I do get the urge to watch Batman Returns, but as far as Tim Burton Batman, this is probably my all-time favorite. Number 4, we have Alien. This is just something that nobody really told me about this one either, but it was part of pop culture. I remember being a kid in a store and seeing a movie poster for this, wanting to see it, and then my mom was like, absolutely not. So I didn't get to see this one until I was a teenager. Directed by Ridley Scott. It stars Sigourney Weaver, Tom Skerritt, great John Hurt. Classic movie. Really enjoy it. And this one has incredible picture, great sound, and I just absolutely love it. The 4K transfer on this is perfect. If you love this film and you're just getting back into collecting, I highly recommend grabbing the 4K. Number 5 is Leon the Professional. This is directed by Luc Besson, and this one stars Jean Reno, Natalie Portman. When this movie came out, I don't remember exactly how old I was, but Natalie Portman is a year older than me, so when I watched it, I was probably about the same age. And so now this one is just great. If you haven't seen it, Gary Oldman plays the bad guy, and this one just hit me perfect. It was the right time of my life when I saw it. Absolutely amazing. Now, if you haven't seen this movie, I don't want to spoil it, but Jean Reno, he plays a hitman, and Natalie Portman's family is murdered. She ends up going to stay with him and wanting to learn how to become a hitman. I really just absolutely love this film. I could watch it anytime. Number 6 is a modern film. I don't have too many modern films on 4K that I absolutely love. I definitely stick to the 80s and 90s and the stuff that I grew up with, stuff I've been watching for years and years. But this is something that it just hit me right. One, I think it's a new film, so the 4K on this is going to be great. And it's Babylon. Margot Robbie, Brad Pitt, you have an amazing cast in this movie, and it just shows, old Hollywood as they were building the movie studios. It's definitely full of debauchery. It opens up in this giant party where they're trying to bring an elephant to it. There's a whole scene where Margot Robbie is doing this table full of cocaine. It really is a debaucherous film. It's something that I've come to love. I really do enjoy it, and then being a modern film, the 4K on this is absolutely incredible. But at the end of the day, this is pretty much just a love story. Margot Robbie's character falls in love with Diego Calva's character, or vice versa. Really did enjoy this film. Now, this one is another Luc Besson film. When I saw this back in the 90s, it just blew me away. It's one of my favorites. Recently, another YouTuber, The Original Fuzz, had recommended that I get this version of the movie. I'm glad I did. It's really great. I don't necessarily think it's a reference disc in the fact that you might want to calibrate your television to this, because I think that they amped up the colors a little bit. So the color grading, I think, on the original 4K is more close to what was on the VHS tape. and I definitely compared it just to double check. But the colors on this, they do pop. They do sing. They look amazing. And as far as being a reference disc to show off the system, I 100% agree. I think it's amazing. I'm glad to have it in the collection, and it's one I'm going to be watching from now on. Number 7, this is The Fifth Element, and what more can I say about this? I absolutely love the cover art on this. Now, being an American, we don't get the age restriction labels on the front. We usually get it on the back, and this being a European import, it has it on the front. I hate it. It takes away from the cover art. That's just me. I also hate this big ugly banner. But I do. I think that is the best it's ever looked. I love that cover art. And this movie itself, one, the color grading is different, and I think it makes it pop on the screen. I have a Sony OLED television, and I think this is probably the coolest looking movie I've ever seen on that television. It's one of my favorites. It stars Bruce Willis, Mila Jovovich, Chris Tucker is in this one. This is just an all-around great film. I really do love it. It's science fiction, it's comedy, it's action. It's all rolled into one, and Luc Besson directed this one. It's got all the things that I love. I know it's not for everybody, but it's probably one of my all-time favorite movies, easily in my top 5. Number 8 is Jaws 2. I really do love this film. I don't know, partly if it's because I found it on my own, and even though it was in the Jaws universe and I was aware of Jaws, nobody was talking about this film. They always mentioned the first one, Steven Spielberg classic, the issues with the mechanical shark didn't work all the time. All that lore from the movie was just pretty much around my life, since I was little. And so I knew about it. But Jaws 2, nobody had mentioned it ever. I turned on the TV one day and this was playing, and I was like, got to sit down and give it a shot. And it's one of my favorites. And being on 4K, I think that the picture is absolutely amazing. The sound is great. And for me, I'll watch Jaws every single summer. But Jaws 2, I'll watch it any time of year. Number 9. Now, this is something that it's part of a trilogy. They have been made some modern reboots and modern sequels. This one here was the very first one I ever saw, and I absolutely love it. When I think of this franchise, I think of the original 3, always, and I do enjoy watching those ones. But this one is the one that I owned, and it's Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade. This is the one that I watched all the time as a kid. Such great memories of watching this film. It's just, Indiana Jones was kind of the coolest. I absolutely loved it. I had this VCR tape, and then eventually I got the other ones, and I knew that it was titled The Last Crusade, but this movie for me was a standalone. I had no idea there were other movies. This stars Sean Connery, obviously Harrison Ford. The late great River Phoenix is in this movie. Oh, it's just a phenomenal one. Pretty much, it's another man movie. It's got everything. Now, it does have some appeal to women, but this is something that any guy can just pop in and they're just hooked. Indiana Jones is pretty much, it's in my top 5, easy. Now, this is my absolute favorite horror, and I know for a fact it is because I found it on my own. Growing up, everyone was talking about Nightmare on Elm Street. I had seen it at that point, and, there's so many other ones that people were talking about. Obviously, Friday the 13th, and, Jason was just very synonymous. I remember every Halloween, the hockey mask was just really simple because they were super cheap and pretty much everyone had one for Halloween. But this movie right here is John Carpenter's Halloween. Now, this came out in the 70s and nobody was talking about it. My entire family didn't really grow up on horror. Horror movies were really saved for Halloween. So number 10 is Halloween. And it's one of those things. I just turned on the TV. They were kind of advertising about this movie right before. I was super excited and they were kind of amping up. It felt almost like a commentary or a documentary. This is back on cable, back in the 90s. And they were talking about how this movie kind of revolutionized the horror genre a little bit, or reinvigorated or something. It was something along those lines. And so I was like, okay, I'll check it out. And now, mind you, I watched this on cable back in the 90s. So it was a little, edited, but man, I still absolutely love it. It's one of my all-time favorites. And as far as like horror movies go, this is up there. For me, this is my absolute favorite horror movie, and I will watch it anytime. I have multiple versions of the movie because I'm a collector, but I love Halloween, and having the 4K here, I think the transfer is amazing. I think the sound is great, and I can just sit down, and this version of it is usually the version I watch once in a blue moon. I'll pop in the VCR tape. but this is the one I always go to. Number 11, if you want to consider this one a horror film, which I kind of do and I kind of don't. I just think it's completely entertaining. But like I said, my all-time favorite horror film is Halloween. This is definitely my top 5 if you consider this a horror film.
They're here.
This is a Steven Spielberg production, directed by Tobe Hooper, and some people say that maybe, they can see some Steven Spielberg direction, and clearly producing it and involved in the picture, you can't figure that his fingerprints aren't all over this film, and it is Poltergeist. Great cast, phenomenal story, absolutely love this film, and I don't really love the cover art. The film is beautiful. I am happy to have this, and I'll watch it any day. But number 12 is something that I found back in the 90s. There was a TV show based on this movie. I didn't know the movie existed, but I was watching the TV show, and around that time I found the movie. This is just such a good film. I mean, the Kurgan has so many great lines in this one. They're usually one-liners. Everything about this was just super fun. There's crazy over-the-top action. The whole premise of the story is awesome. I think this is based off of a book. Let me know in the comments down below. I picked this one up around the time I stopped collecting steelbooks. I'll more on that later, but this one here is probably one of my last steelbooks that I had picked up, and I really do love it. This is a beautiful package. Absolutely love this, and I love having this on display. And like I said, I'm not really collecting steelbooks anymore, but I'm not getting rid of my favorites. Number 13 is controversial because it's one of my favorites, and every time I talk about it, there's a few people that are like, oh yeah, that's a great film, but there's so many people that hit me with they don't like it, it's a stupid film, or it's considered the internet's most hated film. I don't understand it. This is my all-time favorite science fiction comedy, and it's Howard the Duck. I absolutely love this film. This is a George Lucas production, based off the Marvel comic book, but you got Leah Thompson. There's music, there's action, there's comedy, there's, the stop-motion animation in this one. The monster effects are just great. And I just absolutely love this film. Number 14 is part of a trilogy. It's something I absolutely love. And when I think of this one, I do think of all of them. And I like to watch them in kind of a binge fashion where I watch either one every single day or I knock them all out in a weekend. But anytime I hear the music in the store or on the radio, I'm like, oh, I gotta watch Back to the Future. And for me, Back to the Future 3 is my number 14. That's not where I would really rank them. I don't think I'd rank any of these in this order. It's just the order I probably grabbed them off the shelf. Everything about this movie is so iconic, and in my real life, I've only ever seen one DeLorean driving down the road, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the entire world. I had my kids in the car. They thought I was crazy. They've been watching this movie pretty much since they've been alive, and they thought I was stupid for getting so excited for seeing a DeLorean on the road. It's iconic. It's part of the thing. I absolutely love this film, and The Power of Love, that song just kicks it into gear, and I have to watch Back to the Future. It's weird Pavlovian side effect or something, but I absolutely love this film. And my number 15 is something I've been watching since I was a kid. I absolutely love it. It is a fantasy film. It's a Jim Henson production. It stars Jennifer Connelly, David Bowie, and we're talking about The Labyrinth. This is one of my all-time favorites. I love this cover art. It's just great. I don't know if this is 100% nostalgia, so if I had watched it as an adult, maybe I wouldn't like it as much, but this is something that I've been watching since I was a kid, and I could watch it anytime. Jennifer Connelly, she probably was my first crush. This is just, something that I play all the time in the house. And number 16 is one of my all-time favorite Tim Burton films, and it is Sleepy Hollow. This one stars Johnny Depp, Christina Ricci, Christopher Walken is in this movie. Christopher Lee's in this movie. It has everything that I like. It's definitely the macabre. It's not scary, but they're cutting heads off, so it's not super safe.
With the head lopped off.
I really do think this is just great. I absolutely love this film, and you have all the elements that I like, a lot of the actors that I like, and Tim Burton. You really can't go wrong. I really do highly recommend this film, and I think the 4K looks amazing. And number 17 is Flash Gordon. Now, this is another one that I absolutely love. I didn't watch this one growing up. I had no idea it even existed until it was referenced in the movie Ted, and I honestly thought they were kind of spoofing something something else. I didn't know it was real. And so when they announced this one, I pre-ordered it immediately. I watched the trailer, and then I was just hooked. As soon as I got this one, I think it's great. One, I think the transfer is amazing. I think so the picture, the sound, everything about this 4K is great. But the movie itself, I think, is super fun. If you like 70s B movies with a little bit of comedy, this is probably going to be up your alley. But Ming is great. Sam Jones is great. I just think everything about this is just awesome. Number 18 is a weird one because this is something that, we rented back in the 90s, but it was crazy because it's not the type of movie that my mom would have watched. She was, super religious. And so the entire time we watched it, she interjected all of her thoughts and opinions in the movie, which kind of really took that experience away from me. And it wasn't until a few years later that I was able to rent it. I was living out on my own and I watched it with nobody around, and this has become my absolute favorite movie. I really enjoy this one, and having it on the 4K, I think, is the best way to enjoy this, and it's Bram Stoker's Dracula. Now, this one here is just something that it hit me so hard. I absolutely love the acting. Gary Oldman's performance. Keanu Reeves is actually really enjoyable in this one. And you have Winona Ryder. And at the time, man, I thought she was the most beautiful I had ever seen. And so I had a little bit of crush on Winona Ryder. And this one here, great flick. Now, one of my all-time favorite things is, the great Francis Ford Coppola directed this. I found out later that they were trying to push him to use CGI to make this film. And he said, figure it out. And so everything in here is practical effects, and that is awesome. I really do appreciate old movie making and that preservation of quality. I really do think so many modern films are kind of either taken away from by the CGI, or some bad CGI ruins the film. It kind of takes you out of it. But this one here, superb special effects, just a great film. And if you like this type of thing, I highly recommend Dracula. And number 19 is something that I have been watching since the 90s, and I have owned a copy of this on physical format ever since I've been buying movies. And we're talking about Braveheart. This is just a phenomenal film. I would say, honestly, one of the best modern epics, directed by Mel Gibson, and Mel Gibson acted in it. Amazing cast. This 4K has a great picture, great sound. This might actually be a reference disc. I don't know, but I just know that every time I watch it, I'm brought back to memories of watching this when I was a kid. And also my absolute favorite memory is when I was in the Navy, we pulled into Scotland. As we were pulling in, they played this on all the TVs, and it's just one of my absolute favorite movies, so it just was perfect. Now, if you love Braveheart, you're into Mel Gibson, you're just looking for some great action movie to add to your collection, Braveheart on 4K is the perfect one. Number 20, this is something that I didn't think I needed, but back in the day, I worked at Circuit City, and this is before Blu-ray, so we only had really DVDs, and it was just right at the cusp of the HD TVs coming out, and so we had the high definition big screens, and we had to have a reference disc, and there weren't too many reference discs, and it was kind of mandatory that everyone had to have, just on the big screen televisions, cartoon picture to make all the colors pop was just a sales tactic that they used, and they considered it a reference disc. If you want to see what your TV can do with the very best possible pictures, I highly recommend grabbing a cartoon. If you're not into animated films at all, I totally get it. But this one here, Wall-E on 4K, this is my all-time favorite. And I may not have seen this one. I may have passed up on it. But having kids and watching all those Disney movies, this is probably my all-time favorite. And then having that memory of putting in the cartoons on the big screen TVs to sell them. I just remembered how the colors pop and how pretty much there was a sales tactic to get people to buy them. A movie like this gonna make your TV sing and look the best it ever will. If you want to show this off, Wall-E's a great one. That was 20 of my absolute favorite films on 4K. And like I said, I do have films that I like a little bit better. And if those had a 4K, they would have got put on the list and some of these would have got bumped down. But let me know in the comments down below if any of these matched your list or if you're going to be picking any of these up. You're going to want to watch this video right here. With that, watch a movie today, and I'll catch you guys next time.